All right, so we're very fortunate today to have Byron Holland, who is CEO of CIRA, and Jeff White, who is Counsel to Public Interest Advocacy Center, with us to give us some of their thoughts on the issues that face the internet that we as representatives of civil society might wish to have some input on and participate in and try to shape some of that discussion, as well as on how we can improve our methods of advocacy and effectiveness. So I'm going to ask Byron if he would give his remarks first, and then Jeff, and then we'll have a bit of a dialogue. As Evan suggested, we'll go around the room, introduce ourselves, and add any thoughts that we have. And if somebody could take some notes of that, I would be very appreciative.
Oh dear.
Another enthusiastic volunteer.
I'm not the secretary. I want to pay attention. All right, please go ahead, Brian.
All right, well, first, welcome to CIRA. For those of you who haven't been to CIRA before, welcome to our space. It's a pleasure to be able to host an event like this with an organization like ISCC Canada.
How long have you been here?
We have been here for just under a year, 11 months.
In this building?
In this building.
And although we did it formally at the AGM, we didn't get a chance to do it while you were in the room. So thank you again for all of your contributions and support. Starting with the seed funding a few years ago, that really got us able to reorganize and form a meaningful organization. Your support of our symposium last year, and of course hosting this AGM and reception. We're very appreciative of all your cooperation. Thank you very much.
Well, you're...
Thank you for Mark.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, well, that may not have been an intended gift, but
It'll keep on giving.
Yeah, I was going to say, what do you mean by that? The work he's done to date, or the fact that he's moving on?
Column A, little column B.
Yeah. Well, the way I look at this is now ISOC pays for Mark, but we're still a key stakeholder here, so we get him for free now, right? Anyway, well...
Hotel California, Mark.
He's not nodding, you know.
Anyway, welcome to CIRA. For those of you who haven't been to our shop before or have a sense of what we are, but maybe aren't clear on what we basically operate .ca on behalf of all the .ca holders. And what that means is, in a sense, we're the manufacturer of .ca domain names. Anybody wants a domain name that ends with .ca, we create it and it gets sold through our channel of distribution down to the end user. We hold it, make sure that it's secure, that there is only one. When you type in chapters.ca, there is only one of those, and it's held by the rightful owner of that. So we manage all of that piece of it. The part that we're probably not as well known for is operating the DNS, or the underlying infrastructure associated with the .ca domain name zone. And that's all the blinking lights and routers and traffic management on the internet, that when you type in chapters.ca and that transaction goes out and tries to find the one and only official chapters.ca and return it to your browser, we're the authoritative source of traffic routing for that. And the third piece that we do is a lot of work with internet governance, and both domestic and especially on the international front, in terms of how the internet actually interoperates and coordinates from a policy perspective, a technology perspective, a legal perspective, and to some degree a political perspective as well. So those are sort of the three main areas that occupy our team on a daily basis. And making sure that there's a healthy and robust internet ecosystem is part of that mandate. And that's where we interact a lot with ISOC Global, as well as being one of the founding supporters of ISOC Canada, and continuing to support ISOC Canada because of our belief of the role that ISOC can and should and needs to occupy in the Canadian ecosystem. There are, there are a few things that I wanted to talk about today specific to ISOC and the broader landscape. And the first is really around sort of the overall ecosystem here and where some of the players are and who can do what and who's best equipped to do what. Some of the potential, secondly, some of the potential issues that ISOC Canada might consider entertaining. As well as, thirdly, how might the different actors in this space interact in the most productive and effective way possible? Because it's my sense that given the depth and breadth and number of issues associated with the internet, as well as just the pure physical geography of Canada, while there are a number of organizations thinking and working on these issues, there's actually not that many of us. So making sure that we effectively leverage our talents, our resources, our expertise in a way where we collectively can have the best and biggest impact, I think is really important. And having some coordination of that, I think could be very helpful. There are a number of actors in the space. Public interest advocacy clearly is one of the important ones, but there are certainly others like Open Media, Torix, ourselves, ISOC Canada. I mean, governments, both federal, provincial, all of us have a space to occupy and should be able to bring expertise and resources and passion and commitment to what I think is probably the single most important human invention ever, which is the internet, and certainly the most impactful of our age, if not all ages. And each of those organizations has a critical role to play. And when I think about how they interact, a lot of the role that I believe that organizations like these should play flows from their essentially original mandates. And for example, CIRA flows from the original technical mandate. We operate a piece of the internet. Our expertise is in those operations as well as managing the domain name space. Now the domain name space because of its very nature, becomes a little more political. There's more legal issues associated with it, trademark, flow down to copyright, etc. All of those things flow out of running a registry, and although we're aware of copyright and trademark, that's not necessarily our expertise. It doesn't make sense, even though we play in that space a bit, for us to try to be expert in that just because we run a registry. So we look at the technical underpinnings of CIRA and say, where we can engage and add best, highest use of our resources is in and around the technical components of the operations of the internet, which may trip over other broader issues, but fundamentally we guide ourselves by our technical expertise. And I think that every organization in and around the internet space would do well to think about what is the essence of our organization, what is the true expertise that we bring because of the organization that we're from and what our constituting documents say we're about. As I mentioned, CIRA is deeply involved in the global internet governance space, and that gives us an interesting purview vis-a-vis the domestic internet space, because just by dint of what we do, we see many other countries and how they operate, what their issues are, how they're organized internally, both the issues they face, the organizations that deal with them, and the good, the bad, and the ugly of that. We see, how it's worked well in some countries and how it has not worked so well in other countries. And we also get to engage with other types of organizations like IANA, like the IETF, ICANN, IGF, and please stop me if I roll off with an acronym that's not familiar to you. But those are the international actors that we participate with. And I raise them because each of them has a very important role in the ecosystem, but they occupy specific places within the ecosystem to create as much benefit to the ecosystem as possible. And some of them are purely technical, IETF, for example. Some of them are more broad social policy, internet social policy oriented, like the Internet Governance Forum, the global one. Whereas some are really pure technical to make this thing actually work, like IANA. But all of us play valuable roles in that space. Domestically, there are organizations and activities that are critical to the healthy and high-performing functioning of the internet in Canada. One that's near and dear to our heart, but I know also others in this room, are internet exchange points. Internet exchange points, in a sense, that's where bandwidth is actually created. That is where bandwidth comes from. That's where content can be both pushed out and pulled from at an extremely higher performing way than having to go out onto the internet itself, and also a far lower cost way than exchanging traffic between providers. Domestically, there's also the Canadian Internet Forum that provides a policy space for people to come together and discuss the issues of the day. Shameless plug on that one. We're hosting that in conjunction with other partners June 1st, and people are welcome to participate in that. And what we try to do there is bring an international topic, a domestic topic, expert panel, as well as table work to provide input back to the Global Internet Governance Forum. So there are many different places for people who are concerned about, involved in, passionate about the internet in Canada, and making sure that we have sort of the highest, best use of the limited resources collectively, to me, is one of the really important issues of our time. And I think that's where ISOC Canada can really start to play a very, very meaningful role in the Canadian ecosystem. Like CIRA, and I'm not trying to be prescriptive here, I'm just providing an example. Like CIRA's expertise flows from our core mandate, and as a result, we believe we can add value to the broader ecosystem. I think when thinking about issues that ISOC Canada could be engaged in, that's one of the first things to think about. Where is our true expertise? It's based around this table and beyond, but what can we really bring in terms of expertise, and who are we trying to serve? And in ISOC Canada's case, or ISOC in general, of course it's an end user perspective, a civil society perspective. So what do I think some of the core issues are in Canada that ISOC could focus on? Security for me is a big one, but from an end user perspective. The internet is, of course, a wonderful, wonderful, incredibly powerful thing, but with that power, of course, comes a potential for bad actors and malicious actors. And we're highly biased here because we are on the front lines. We are attacked day in and day out, relentlessly. Brute force attacks, technology attacks, phishing attacks, more and more sophisticated state-based actor attacks versus individual attacks. So, we may be a little biased, but we experience it every day. And the healthy and robust functioning of a Canadian internet demands not only that the technical layer be strong and robust and resilient, but the end user needs to be as well. You need to understand that potential phishing attack, what that looks like, what that feels like. Be educated. Increase the levels of digital literacy around safety and security. Not just usage and technology, but pure safety and security. Personal, as in I won't be harmed. Your system won't be harmed and infected to then become part of a broader botnet or other forms of malicious usage of one's own device, because that's how botnet get formed is that an individual's computer gets compromised by something inbound, right? And now we have botnets in the tens, hundreds of thousands, millions of nodes. So creating digital literacy for the end user around what security means as an individual. How do I protect myself? How do I protect the piece of the internet that I interact with? I think is critical and underserved. And as an organization that's end user focused, there is no shortage of opportunity to upgrade our overall digital literacy skills when it comes to security related issues. Privacy and surveillance. And that's a much talked about subject in many, many quarters and forums. Governments, of course, are responsible to protect their citizens. They're accountable to their citizens for doing that effectively, and I wholeheartedly support their efforts to do that effectively. On the other hand, the amount of data that we produce now, there isn't a government out there that doesn't want more and more and more, and deeper and deeper and broader and broader. And I think that governments and other actors need to have what's required to fulfill their responsibilities. But as individual citizens, it's up to organizations, I think, like ISOC, to have informed and educated discussions at the grassroots level about where those lines can be drawn. How can we ensure government has what they need to fulfill their obligations while ensuring the protection and security of individuals' privacy? And that delicate balance, I mean, that's a spectrum, and it's a balance drawn differently in different countries, even in Western democracies. But what's Canada doing? Where are we going to place ourselves on that spectrum? And as data becomes more ubiquitous, as analytics get more and more and more powerful, where do we draw that line that I still get to go home and be, have a private environment? There's a reason we have curtains, right? There's a reason we close the bathroom door. We need privacy, right? And that's sort of, I would look at it as kind of a right of the individual, a right of the citizen, but those lines are getting blurred and pushed. And to me, that is an area that has a lot of opportunity for an organization like ISOC to be very, very involved in. And I have two more that I just wanted to talk a little bit about. One is around, overall sort of broadband and access issues. And again, I will put out a shameless plug for the organization. We just released yesterday a piece of research that we did on speed and health of the internet in Canada. So it's the what we call the IPT, Internet Performance Test, and it's not just a speed checker, although we do that, but it looks at upload, download speed, it looks at ping, jitter, DNSSEC, IPv6, and 94 other data points associated with the overall health of the internet. So far we've had about 150,000 tests across Canada. We've effectively crowdsourced the data, and the end user gets a very, very robust, neutral, independent, true end-to-end check of their internet connection. And in return, we get an aggregate data source that gives us a really good understanding of the overall health and performance of the internet in Canada, in provinces, in cities, and while we haven't released it to this level of detail, right down to your postal walk. So we can see street by street what the internet performance looks like, neighborhood by neighborhood. So you think Ottawa came out number 2 overall in terms of cities in Canada, in terms of upload download speed at least. But neighborhood by neighborhood it changes. There are neighborhoods in Ottawa that are almost 3 times as fast as other neighborhoods. If you're on the other side of the Rideau River here, by definition your speeds are significantly lower than if you're over here. Surprisingly, Canada's not that fast overall.
I can tell, Coach.
Great.
Ask you about that.
No worries.
And while I'm clearly shamelessly plugging the piece of work that we did, the first thing that comes to mind when I say the words I just said is, well, why is that? How could that be? Why is Canada slow and Blossom Park fast? It raises so many questions, and the kinds of questions that need further unpacking, dissemination and unpacking, because they're directly relevant to the end user experience. And I think that's the kind of space, when I think about where ISOC could act in terms of talking about broadband and access, though hopefully we can support with data, where ISOC can then take the ball and run with it in other forums and educational forums. Finally, I think there's a lot of interesting work that needs to be done around jurisdictional issues, right? I mean, the internet is a global, interoperable, permissionless environment, more or less. And yet we live in countries. We are citizens. We are subject to laws of our land, our institutions, etc. And there's a lot of work there around how those two disparate elements come together and how do we make sense of them? How do we educate people? How do we think about, okay, I'm pushing all my data and information, I'm pushing me to the cloud. Well, what is the cloud, right? I mean, it's a server sitting in a rack in a data center in somebody's legal jurisdiction. Some other country. Chances are, some other country's legal jurisdiction, which may or may not, if push comes to shove, be consistent with our culture, our thoughts, our law, our way of being. So I think there's a lot of space in that intersect of global, interoperable, permissionless internet and national jurisdiction work that ISOC Canada could do some work in thinking around. Let me conclude with just, how can we collectively, and I say the broad we, as in we who are interested in the healthy functioning of the internet in Canada, work together. There are a number of us as organizations, but there aren't that many of us, to be frank, who are really focused on these issues. And as I started with, the breadth and depth of issues, let alone the breadth of our country, make that a challenge. Who here has too much budget that they can just do other stuff with? Right? I mean, everybody's resource constrained in some way, shape, or form. So making sure that we most effectively deploy the resources that we have is critical. And I think that's where being somewhat organized between organizations, we can have the greatest impact. We know what we do. ISOC, by definition of a conversation like this, is plotting where you think you can bring the best, highest value to the issues in Canada and to the end users in Canada. So I think getting a clear understanding and working together between many of these groups would be a good first step. So how do we bring the groups together in a more consistent and perhaps somewhat more regularized way? It doesn't always have to be physical, all right? I mean, there's many ways to connect. So I think that is something that we should give real consideration to, whether we take advantage of some other event that many of us go to, whether it's Canadian Internet Forum or the ISP Forum or maybe the Telco Summit. I mean, there's a whole range of them. How can we come together and start being more coordinated and therefore hopefully effective? And also a word of warning. This is a game of inches, right? There's very few big wins to be had, and it takes a lot of grinding in the corners to make material steps. We released a big report yesterday. I was actually at the Ottawa Smart Cities kickoff event this morning, and it got a ton of traction because I could tell people, oh, you live in Blossom Park, you have great speed, and oh, you live in Orleans? Too bad for you, right? I mean,
in so many ways.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Yeah. So it got a lot of traction. Oh, send me the report, and that's amazing. We're going to do this and that with it, and the city CIO and the councilors, and you know, yada yada yada. That's a moment in time. We have been building that thing for a couple of years. We've baited it, we've trialed it, we failed. You know, we went backwards, we pushed it forwards, and we finally put out this report. Right? That was a couple of years of work. And resources and some money, to be sure. But we are going to make a difference with that. And we're going to make a material difference, and we're going to kick off a bunch of conversations, some of them uncomfortable, and some of them somewhat surprising. But that has been a long, tough slog, and not to end on a down note, but just a pragmatic note that this is a game of inches, but significant progress can be made if it's thought through, strategic in nature, and executed effectively. And just by definition of the fact, you folks, we are all here and our organizations are thinking about this, I'm very optimistic that we can continue to move the needle and make a significant difference. And bring Canada back to the 1, 2, or 3 position across global internet metrics, where I think we rightly should be.
Here, here.